Hello and welcome to LoveWorkLife 60-Minute Mentors. I hope everyone's happy and well today. Certainly looking outside my door, it's a bit breezy and a bit cloudy, but it's not raining, which is quite good. If you can hear me, please feel free to drop us a quick note in the chat or the answer room so we can make sure that you can hear us and we can know that you've got somebody to listen to, and Paul and I just aren't talking to ourselves as we spend the rest of the week doing, just chatting aimlessly among ourselves. Hello everybody, thank you very much. So last week we spent an awful lot of time going through a lot of the questions that you posed to us last week, and we are getting questions weekly from you guys, which is absolutely brilliant. And what we try and do is roll the questions into our topics and into our topics of conversation and try answer those. If we don't answer those questions, then what we like to do is roll those questions over into the following week and try answer those questions in the following week. So if you are sending questions into them, keep sending them. If you have questions that you want to post to us during the webinar, feel free to stick them through and we will try and answer them as well as we can. There's a lot to go on today's webinar. Once and I, Paul, sort of get to grips with the questions and start to write what we want to talk about, then we seem to find that there's an awful lot of context and content that we need to sort of cover and work from there. So as people are logging in, I want to say, keep those questions coming, because Paul and I really appreciate them, and keep the sort of comments coming through to us about how you're doing as well, because we love to see people starting to really come out of or starting to recovery. And we realize that's not all the people on this webinar are coming out of recovery, but we've got to start to really work together as a group, I think, to make sure that everyone comes out towards the end of it. So as we kicked off, Paul, as we finished off last week, one of the big questions that we had last week that we didn't have a chance to really answer was around cash flow and forecasting. What do you think that we should be doing around that marketplace that we're not probably currently doing?
Well, first and foremost, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another lockdown week. What the heck's happened to the weather? I mean, it's like the middle of winter out here. In normally sunny, balmy Woodford Green, it's absolutely grey and miserable. But not grey and miserable as far as Howard and I are concerned. We've got lots to cheer you up about during this next hour. Let's talk about cash flow. I think it's an incredibly important conversation at this moment. We've got to be very mindful during a downturn in the economy about collecting monies owed to us. I think one of the things I always feel, Howard, is that, when people say to me, my clients say, I'm a little bit nervous about chasing people, badgering clients to pay the monies that they're owed. I always feel, well, at the end of the day, the transaction has taken place and these clients are now sitting on your money. It's not their money. It's your money. And there is a reasonable period of time that you will allow a client to hold on to your money, but there's a point at which you are well within your rights to be asking questions about receiving payments. And I think a word of warning, and I imagine most people are going to be agreeing with me on this point, especially during periods where life gets tougher, and there's no question that that's the situation we're all in right now. Organizations do two things. They chase very hard for monies owing to them, and they delay as much as they can paying people that they owe. And so I think you need to be very aware of the fact that chasing for your money is not something you should be too nervous about. We talked about this yesterday, Howard, and I was saying to you that I think that this whole issue of credit control is something that often, I think, gets ignored by owners. And I sometimes look at debtor days and look at monies owed and get a bit worried about how long clients are sort of allowed to hold on to monies owing and not being chased. And that bothers me a great deal, especially at the moment. And we know we need to be, again, very mindful. And not every organization that you've been dealing with are likely to survive a recession. I'm not trying to sound, too doom and gloom here, but let's just wake up, smell the coffee, folks. The truth is that during any level of depression or recession, some companies will not make the grade. I've already had that issue with one of my clients who owed my client money for what we all call a backdoor placement. Lo and behold, after receiving legal letters from us, they went into voluntary administration, and you can guarantee they're opening up another business the following day. So I think please be aware that you're in dangerous waters here. Chasing for your money is something that should be foremost in your minds on a daily basis. Would you not agree with that, Howard?
I do, and I think there's two ways to look at that. Is that you have to play the game to a certain extent, and the big players and the big market players are great at playing the game. So they will hold on to your money as long as possible, but then they'll demand that you pay as quick as possible. So it's two ways, but you've got to think about what you're actually doing. So if you're holding on to somebody's money and you're causing them the same effect that you have, then does that class with your mission statement of being authentic, your mission statement of being ethical, etc.? So yes, you have to play the game, but what you've also got to think that if you carry on playing the game in that way, what you're probably going to end up with is some form of legal letter. If you then don't pay after that, then you're probably going to end up with court charges and fines as they try to bring that money back. So it's actually going to cost you more money at the end of the day. And I think the flip side of that is, on your side of the business, is understanding your DSO. DSO being day sales outstanding, from the day that you raise your invoice to the day that you actually get paid, is really important that you understand what that actually means to your business. So I always think that certainly when I was a part of the Adecco group, to give you an idea of how important day sales outstanding are, in the Adecco world at the stage in 2008, they had an average debtor day across the world of 78 days. And for every day they reduced their debtor day, that put between 10 and 20 million pounds on their bottom line. So you can start to understand that if you control your debtor days properly and reduce them, then it's saving your money, your company money, because what a lot of companies do is they borrow to pay contractors and pay temps. They have money that they've paid out for permanent deals and salaries that they're paying out. So constantly, the longer that debt is outstanding, the less that debt is actually covering the cost of your business. So it's important that you really understand your debtor days and really understand that chasing and bringing money back into the business is absolutely priority to make sure your cash flow is functioning properly. Otherwise, you can make as many sales as you like. If you're not getting paid for those sales, then your business will go under, because your business becomes a cash flow issue.
I mean, I'd add another point here, Howard. I mean, we often talk these days about looking after the local traders in the high street. We're all keen to trade with our local small businesses. I think it's vital to do everything we can to take care of those little businesses that mean a lot to us. And I think that probably applies to us as well. If there are people, and I can see names here, who are owners of small recruitment businesses, I think you've every right, in the nicest possible way, to speak to your clients and make them aware that keeping you waiting for the monies that you're owed is endangering your existence. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. Asking them to take care of you should be, from their point of view, a loyalty test. If they really value the services that you provide and they believe that you give them great service, then frankly, paying you on time, or even potentially before on time, should be something that they're prepared to do. And I'm sure there are many clients you have who already do that. Certainly it's true, and I know this is true with Howard. I've got clients who, God bless them, I send in my monthly invoice, and literally within one working day they've paid me. I mean, I always feel unbelievably flattered when I see that, because I feel it's a big compliment, and I genuinely feel that you have clients that feel that way about you. And I know, I can't see you, but I know you'll be nodding your heads. Remember that people that treat their suppliers badly often treat their own staff badly. And I think be mindful of that. Therefore, when it comes to credit control and deciding who you need to chase hard, you'll probably be well aware of those companies that need to be pushed quite quickly. I mean, just picking up on Howard's point, it's often the large businesses, the large corporations, who have got very cumbersome payment terms, very cumbersome payment finance divisions and so forth, that keep you waiting a long time. It's the bigger businesses typically that will make you wait 45 to 60 days, God forbid, 90 days before paying you. And that really is an issue, particularly if you've got temporary staff working for you. And you guys know, I mean, I'm sure you have finance lines in place for that, but let's be very clear. The moment a temp finishes work, a week later, having put in their timesheets, they expect to be paid. You've barely got the invoice out to the client at that point. So getting your money in is vital, I think. One of the things we talked about yesterday was the need for, potentially, or at least the need for looking at software to attach to your system. So I'm not giving them an advert, although I think they're very good. I use Xero, Xero, and some of you guys I'm sure use Xero. I think it's a brilliant product. You can get latch on credit control software that will automatically be sending out statements and reminders to clients once you've sort of programmed it. And it takes a lot of the emotion away from you having to do it. And I know when I speak to a lot of my clients, and I feel it myself sometimes, sending chase notes is uncomfortable. You know, you want to retain a great relationship with your clients, and you don't want to get into conflict with them and have to chase. It feels uncomfortable, can be a bit embarrassing. Not that you necessarily should feel that way. After all, you're being placed in that position. But nevertheless, you want to maintain a good relationship with your clients. So it does feel uncomfortable sometimes. But I think the closer you are with your clients, the better your relationship, the easier it is to have those conversations. And I think that if you are able to put on some quality software onto your credit control, or consider, if you're not already, using an outsource individual or an outsourced company to do your credit control, or if you've got a bookkeeper or a part-time bookkeeper, somebody that would do that for you rather than you do it, then great. I think that's helpful. But ignoring it is simply not an option, especially during these very difficult times, because as I've already said, there'll be companies that will hold on to your money for a very long time, and others that may not make the grade and may disappear over the next 6 to 9 months.
I think there's a slightly bigger issue just evolving your technology, because your technology is absolutely right. It can help you, bring your money back to you a little bit quicker. But certainly when I was at Deco in that 2008 period, unfortunately for computer people, I was given the task of reducing our debtor days. And when I started to dig into the process of what we did to collect the cash, it wasn't always the collection process that was at issue. What was at issue started right on the shop floor. So it started with the consultants, and the consultants weren't gathering the right information for the invoicing procedure, not giving the right invoicing address, etc., not having the right PO number. All these things delay you getting paid. So having your procedures set right with your consultant is really important. What I then found out when I started to really dig at it, that the consultant wasn't really incentivized to do that, because we were paying, once the invoice had been raised, we were then paying commission on that invoice, because we thought that invoice would chase and done properly. We had a huge back office chasing those. So we paid in that way. And it was really interesting that the interesting part when it comes to payment wasn't being viewed by the consultant as interesting to them. It wasn't anything to do with them. So why chase for that information? When we suddenly changed to being paid when we get paid, so the consultant gets the commission when the business gets paid, you can guarantee all of a sudden all the payment procedures were absolutely correct. Everything was absolutely done correct. And it reduced our debtors day by about 15 days overall in about 6 months. So all of a sudden, by involving your consultants and understanding that a deal isn't a deal until it's actually been paid for, it changes everything. So making your consultants also committed to ensuring all the details they'll put on the system are correct in the first place, because it's pointless you sending out a lovely invoice from Xero or from whatever system that you're using, only to find it's going to the wrong person, it's got the wrong details on, it hasn't got the right code on, it hasn't got the right PO number on, etc., all for them to hold it, then send it back to you, and then say, oh, and by the way, your 30 days for payment, 14 days for payment, 6 days for payments starts again from when you get the invoice right, is a real pain. So making sure your consultants get the information right, put it on your CRM correctly before we submit the invoice, again, is a real good pointer to make sure that you're systems work for you, because if you put garbage in your system, you'll get garbage out of your system. And when you send garbage to your clients, they tend not to pay for that. So again, I'd make sure that you're getting your systems absolutely correct.
I think you raise a really interesting point, actually, Howard. I mean, a lot of my clients, and I think it's great. They pay their consultants a month after the invoice has gone off, and obviously, we haven't been paid at that stage. I think that's probably true of most recruitment businesses. However, there are some of my clients who only pay, to your point, commissions once the invoices have been paid. Certainly once the credit refund periods have been passed as well. And I think if you're not considering that, maybe you want to consider that. Are you going to pay your consultants when you've been paid? Certainly not an unreasonable situation. I think clearly if it's a big corporation, if you're a much bigger business, then you've got the funding, I would hope, to be able to pay your consultants prior to receiving payment from your clients. But when you're a very small business, it's a call. It's something you have to think very hard about. And of course, I think a lot of that is to do with, in terms of making a decision, what kind of clients you're dealing with, and the level of risk related to those clients. And of course, what we know from the banking crisis back in 2008, 2009, is that, where before that we felt that there were certain businesses that we thought would be around for centuries, we discovered very quickly that those large corporations, those large banks, went under. And so I think those days of thinking that any company, particularly large ones, are likely to be around for forever have gone. We know any company is vulnerable regardless of size. So I think these are tough calls to make, but I think decisions that you do need to think hard about as we start to get out there, as we're beginning to get out there and start to work again. One of the things I'd add to this point, Howard, is that I think what we also have to do as we now go back into work is look at our cash flow projections. Now, none of us, or very few of us, actually enjoy sitting down and working through the spreadsheets and try to predict cash flow projections. And you can only do that, of course, off the back of re-evaluating your sales figures and your cost figures. And I think one of the things that you guys are no doubt doing, and if you're not, I believe you really should be doing, is making new projections for the coming, certainly for the end of this year or the end of your financial year, and looking at what you now believe your business is going to do in terms of revenue generation. You've no doubt been, and you have been working on your cost base, I know, over the last 13, 14 weeks, again, projecting what your costs are likely to be in terms of staff salaries. We just talked about it, bonus payments, and obviously all of the other on costs, including things like rent and so on and so forth. All of those projections need to be looked at all over again. Everything that we wrote 4, 5, 6 months ago or a year ago are now completely invalid. We have to start all over again. And I think one of the things that I always did, even during the good times, was I got my consultants and my managers and my senior leaders to write their own projections and forecasts. I would separately do that, and we would sit down and compare notes. It's always interesting when you do it, because you'll always get some people that over predict. They want you to believe they're going to be, super billers, and gives them a sense of security. And then you'll get others that lowball like crazy and come in with silly figures. And somewhere in between, realistically, is where you think you're going to be. And I think having that inclusive method of forecasting, don't sit there on your own or sit there with your finance people and do it. Get your guys to do it, and then individually have meetings with them, go through their projections, arrive at the right decisions between you, and then you plant that information into your spreadsheets. And from that, as Howard's been talking about, look at your cash flow projections. At what point will you receive the monies relative to the invoices going out? And I think that's an immediate action point. Review and reforecast your projected revenues and costs over the next 6 to 12 months, because nothing that we wrote prior to this point, prior to pre-COVID, is valid any longer. It's all changed. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll downgrade. Some of you guys might be feeling extremely optimistic, but you certainly still need to do it.
So I think there's an interesting point there, and I'll give you a point that I had with a company that I took over who was in their own mini recession due to their poor management before that. And, it's understanding when you do top down, bottom up budgeting and then do forecasting and rolling forecasts, you can start to use your data really well to start to establish who's telling you the truth and what's actually going on. And so you always have your financial projections, best case, what's likely to happen, and worst case scenario. And therefore, when you're talking to your consultants about their review of their forecast, again, you're looking at best case, worst case, and what's likely to happen. And I always remember this consultant coming to me, and every month it would be, I'm going to bill 70k, I'm going to bill 70k. And I'd put into the business bullhorn, and I said, right, okay, everyone needs to fill out bullhorn in real time, and then we can start to create data, and I can then start to use that data to actually incentivize you and show you where you can make more money and how you can sell more proficiently. And so we started to do that really well. And after 4 or 5 months, I could then start to send it to people and say, right, look at your forecast. And I'd have the data in front of me, and the person would say, I'm forecasting 70k. And I go, right, go through every single client, and he'd list the clients and go, right, that client's brand new. That client on average takes 12 weeks to make a placement. It's just come in here. That client, we only fill around about 5% of their placements anyway, and you put that down, etc., etc. And I used to take his 70k back to 7k. And then all of a sudden, after 3 months on the trot, when my forecast was correct and his was incorrect, and I was starting to highlight where clients were weak, clients were strong, he started to understand that actually the data will enable him to focus on clients that will actually bring money to him rather than wasting in time. So involving your staff into that, but then teaching them what that data is going to do and teaching what that forecast is going to do is really important. And what we were doing is we weren't trying to catch him out. We weren't trying to belittle him. What we were trying to do is stop him being so over enthusiastic and think he's going to have this huge month and then have this massive swathe of disappointment when he didn't. But what was interesting when I talked to them about the previous ownership and what was going on, what they were finding was that they were expecting 70k. When the 70k wasn't coming in, they were then jumping up and down and demanding what was going on because they weren't evaluating the forecast and weren't evaluating what's going on. So they had a false sense of, I suppose, a false sense of net worth based on forecasting, when really you have to be realistic about forecasting. So get your forecasting as neat as possible and as strict as possible, and use data to make sure that your forecasting comes in within 5 to 10% of what you forecast. And that is it. So if your forecast is to do in a month, and I'm just going to use optional figures, to do 100k a month, and you come in at 50k a month, then your forecast is wildly out, and you've got to understand why it's wildly out and work on that. Again, if it comes in at 150k a month, again, that's brilliant, but your forecast is wildly out. Why is your forecast wildly out? Because what it says is you don't understand your business well enough to actually understand what's going on within your business. So you need to get to really know what each individual consultant does and what they do when we start to forecast, to make sure we understand everything about the business.
To that end, Howard, I mean, I think that, and you make a really great point here, I think that the only way, of course, that you can come up with anything remotely accurate is you've got to be talking to your clients. You know, if you're going to put together a forecast, you've got to be talking to your clients, and you need to be doing that now. What do they believe they're likely to be doing for the remaining element of 2020 back into the financial year of end of March 2021? Now, they may find it extremely difficult to be able to give you any information at this stage, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be having those conversations. And if the information we're receiving is fairly low forecast, low ball, then so be it. I mean, that's the situation. You need to know about it. You know, being unaware or burying your head in the sand is not an answer. What is it that clients think they're likely to be spending in recruitment terms for the next 6 months to the next 9 months? You need to know. If it's vague, fair enough. If it means then that you recognize that the level of income that you're going to be receiving based on the information you're getting from clients is going to be extremely low, has a bearing on your cost base. It has a bearing on very difficult decisions relative to the number of staff you need in your business, but it also informs you about your absolute need to get out and develop new clients, to find new business. And there will be new business opportunities out there. It also talks to what other services you're going to be offering, how you upgrade the quality of your service, because it may be that the clients you're talking to are not using you exclusively. And therefore there may be more money to be had more revenues to be had from a specific client. If you're the exclusive provider of services, you get a greater share of that opportunity, a greater share of wallet, as we used to call it. So I think there are a range of questions that you'll ask yourself, but you can only ask yourself those questions following deep conversations with your clients. And now, and over the next 4 weeks is the time to do that, aligned with reforecasting. You've got to do that in order to be able to figure out how many staff you're going to need and what you're going to do in relation to all of the other costs. So for example, yesterday, conversations around LinkedIn licenses, when I was talking to one particular client, do we renew? How many licenses do we need? What kind of license do we want? These are all very valid questions. Other questions relative to spend on job boards, all of these things are coming up now. What do we do? It's not normal. How much do we spend? How many licenses do we need? And these are all very difficult questions to answer unless we're very close to our clients and understanding what their requirements are likely to be.
So that leads us to sort of one sort of point that we've been asked this question lots of times with regards to two things, with regards to consultant targets and with regards to fees and margins, etc. So before we talk about, and we've talked a lot about, don't get into that war with fees, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but you must set walk away points for your consultants to know when to walk away. There's no point, destroying your business by competing in a ridiculous marketplace. But when we start talking about targets, there's been lots of schools of thought about what we do about targets and how we readdress our targets. And I've looked at it in very much in this way. The whole world basically came to a standstill 102 days ago. And 102 days ago, the market stopped and everyone, almost all of us, stopped having lots and lots of requirements to work on, etc., etc. Yes, some industries kept working and kept moving forward, which is absolutely excellent, but some industries ground to a halt. And I looked at this when I was talking to a client last week and said, if you think about all your consultants that have been on a break now for 3 months, on furlough for 3 months, and you've got some clients, consultants that have been in-house and they're working in-house and they're manfully holding the fort for you. If you had brought a new person into your business, irrespective whether they were someone with recruitment experience or whether they were brand new, fresh out the wrapper, and you were trying to train them, what would you do with their targets in the first 3 months? You would ramp their targets up so they've got an opportunity to get in line and build their client base, build their candidate base, and get back into where they were if they were a consultant with experience. A new consultant, again, because they're lacking that experience, you'd ramp their target up over a certain period of time. You just wouldn't say, as soon as you come back in July, your target's going to be full bore, off you go. So with reviewing targets, there's lots of different things that you can do. But to me, I think I would be very fair to my staff. And I think I'd be thinking, right, okay, let's treat everyone as if they have just started. And therefore, we're going to ramp our targets up over 3 months, because we know that first month is going to be all about getting under the client's skin, finding out what's going on there, looking at your candidate marketplace to make sure your candidate marketplace is still intact. Who have you got that's new? Who you can market out to the clients, etc., etc. Then you start to see the product of your work, because then you start to see requirements start to come in. So then it starts to move in that fashion. So if it was me, I would be seriously thinking about how I target my candidates as consultants. Now, it might be your consultants come back in and start hitting their normal targets straight away. But how do they feel and how do they think if you came in and gave them that type of target? So I would seriously think about ramping up targets rather than giving them a straightforward target. But I'd also make sure they understand what's expected of them, because your company has a break-even point every month to achieve, and that is what we need to make sure that we firstly cover off. But it's a mindset game with the consultants, where it's a financial game with business owners.
Well, I think you make a great point, Howard. I mean, look, we've talked and we've talked about these webinars as, almost like startups again. Are we recommencing our business or are we starting up? And I think that's relevant to the point you've just made. We know that it's going to take a little while for a momentum to develop. It's pushing that boulder, isn't it? It's there, it's rigid at the moment. You've got to push your weight behind it, and hopefully you start to get some motion, and then things start moving quickly. There are many imponderables, things that we're not aware of that could happen yet. They're talking potentially the discussion around Leicester, for example. There's a lot of talk around potential spikes. We don't know quite what's around the corner, whether they'll come up with with some kind of cure or cures for the virus at the moment. None of these things are known to us, but you can only really make your predictions based on what you know today. And I think you're right about the targets. We don't want to be unkind to our consultants. At the same time, we've got to try and make a profit as soon as possible. I'm often surprised when I talk to particularly new clients, when I look at their bonus schemes, that sometimes they don't have thresholds in the bonus scheme. So in other words, consultants earn money from the very first penny they bill. That's not the way I was brought up. I'm not saying I'm right, but for me, commission or bonus if we take that word, should be something that is paid after the consultant has made enough money to cover their costs. So I've always had thresholds in my commission schemes with my consultants way back 30, 40 years. You have to invoice X amount of money randomly. I'll say £4,000 or £5,000 a month, £7,000 a month. It depends on your invoice values, your cost base, and so forth. But they earn nothing on that first chunk, on that threshold, and then after that, they get bonus. And obviously, I'd like to think that'd be an attractive bonus. But for me, they've got to invoice. They're being paid to sell. They're being paid to make money. And so the very least you should be getting from them, I would say the very least, it's pretty awful if it is enough money to cover the cost of actually employing them. Why would you pay bonus before they've at least covered the cost of sitting at a desk? So I think, again, look at your bonus plans, look at your bonus schemes, review them. Are they fit for purpose? Do you have thresholds? Would you consider having thresholds? If you haven't got them, what level should the thresholds be placed at? And if you're going to change your bonus schemes, then I think I always feel this way, that if you're taking away, you have to give. So I think if you're changing them, then you have to make them more attractive in other respects, because you don't want to demoralize your staff by changing bonus plans. So they look at the new schemes and think, well, I've got no chance of making any commission, therefore I'm not going to try. So I think it's a fine balancing act. I've had millions of conversations around bonus plans over the years. But there are ways and means of providing brilliant bonus plans to people and at the same time protecting your cost base in terms of employing staff.
So what we're talking about really, Paul, is making those tough calls now on a business that moves forward post-lockdown, and how we do that. And again, we've had lots of conversations and we've had lots of questions regarding staff that are on furlough, when to bring them back, who to bring back, and what happens to those people. And I think that first thing is about making sure when they come back through the door that they have something of note that they are looking at. They have something that entices them and makes them desire for the recruitment sort of energy burn again. And I think it's about making sure that when we bring staff back into the business, we're bringing the right staff back into the business. And I think we've got to all look at that opportunity lost versus cost, and look at what's the opportunity of bringing that person back in. Is that going to cost me, or is that going to create profit? And that includes bringing back people that might be diversive within the business, people that might be destructive within the business. You have a comment now, or an opportunity now to say, do you want that person back or not? And it's a very harsh environment to be in, but you've got those opportunities to weigh up all those pros and cons about whether you do or whether you don't, and make a decision based on fact and using your head rather than your heart to do that. And I can give you a story of, I gave a story last week about, removing a person from an office. I inherited another office where I found, as I walked in, the manager was going on holiday. And as I walked in and introduced myself, he said, by the way, I just so you're aware, on Monday I'm going on holiday for a fortnight. And then within about 2 hours, he came back and said, do you mind if I extend it for 4 weeks? And I suddenly sort of thought, there must be something a little bit untoward here that I'm possibly going to find out that he doesn't want me to find out, and he's going to hide. So I said, yeah, absolutely, go away for 4 weeks. And when I dug into his business, I found some shocking processes, some shocking things going on, and basically had a load of people in his business. He had 7 consultants in his office, all paid a consultant salary. But what was actually happening was he was making them all resource for him, paying them a resource bonus, and he was taking all the money. And he was there making the office look profitable when actually the guys were doing all the work for him. It was interesting when I removed him from the office within 3 months, we tripled the turnover within the business and what was going on. So he was a very, very well thought of person within the business until you actually dug under the skin. And it was quite interesting when he came back 4 weeks later. I was in Nottingham, and I arrived in the office at 5 a.m. thinking there's definitely something in. And at 5:20, who comes walking into the office? I thought, well, that's pretty strange. What are you doing at 5:20? Looking very sheepish, thinking he was going to take the data and take all the things. And we had a very quick conversation, and he realised what was going on and handed his notice in. So I didn't have to remove him. But it's looking at the opportunity cost and digging underneath it to find that not all people on the outside that are perceived to be good billers are actually making your business more profitable. Removing him from the business means we made 3 times as much from the same people.
Listen, I can pick up additional stories around that. I mean, it's a terribly difficult thing to remove people if that's what you have to do from your company. A number of people listening here will no doubt be thinking along these lines at the moment. Nobody wants to put people through that misery. I mean, it's not a pleasant thing having to sit down in front of people and let them know that you no longer want them in your company. Unfortunately, over the years, 40 odd years, I've had to do it many times. It's not pleasant. It never gets any easier. So to pick up your point, Howard, I think if you're going to do it, it has to be based on facts, on absolute hard, cold facts, not on emotion. And you need a method of evaluating performance. And obviously you can't evaluate performance during this recent 3-4 month period. But you can certainly look at behaviors that people have provided during this 3-4 month time since we've been working from home. And you can certainly look at cold, hard data and facts relative to their performance pre-COVID. And just pick up your point about, sometimes high billers being high maintenance. And I can think of an office in the northeast of England where we had an absolute in-office angel, was a brilliant biller, somebody that year in, year out produced amazing revenues, but we could not get other people to work with this person. Just a constant revolving door of people coming in and out who wouldn't last 5 minutes. And this individual went out of their way to try and isolate colleagues and prevent them succeeding. And we had a whole range of issues. We just couldn't build a proper business with this person in it. And eventually we removed this individual, and we ended up having, to your point, a more successful company. Certainly the revenues were spread more evenly across the consultants we had in there, which made it in itself a much better situation, because we were more at risk with one person producing all of the revenue. Spreading the risk across several consultants made it a much easier thing for us to manage. And from what I understood, the harmony, the level of cooperation, the general spirit in the office improved dramatically. And it's a terribly difficult thing to remove somebody that makes an awful lot of money for the business, but is divisive and causes problems for you. This isn't just an issue that you should be thinking about during a COVID period. It's certainly an ongoing problem at any point in your business. But I think when you're looking at your people, certainly the way that they've been behaving recently should give you an indication, and based upon your previous knowledge of them, as to whether you believe they're going to come and fight in the trenches with you shoulder to shoulder. Because there's no question that we are, and you guys know this, we're entering recession. It's going to get tougher. Doesn't mean that we're not going to do well. Doesn't mean you can't build market share. Doesn't mean you can't be hugely successful. But it needs a different mindset. And you need fighters, people that are going to come in every day with their boxing gloves on, ready to go for it. And you want people like you who are going to be up for the battle, made of the right stuff, as we discussed last week. You know who they are. You can see those people in your business, and you also know those that haven't got the stomach for it. And you're going to need to make those calls fairly fast. On the other side of the coin, and we've talked a lot about this recently, Howard, there's a brilliant opportunity to bring fresh talent into your business. And I've been personally very involved over the last 4 or 5 weeks with second, third interviewing consultants and managers for several of my clients who are using this opportunity to upgrade, as it were, their staff, to bring in real talent, people that have decided to leave their current employers, or have been let go, perhaps mistakenly, by their current employers. And I think now's a brilliant opportunity to look around and see who's on the market. And in my opinion, you may never have a better opportunity than now to go looking for people that will make a significant difference to your company.
So I think it's quite interesting that it's all about that heart and head emotion when it comes to management, and using cold, hard facts and data to do that. And I think what we've got to start to think about when we're bringing people back into the business, I always think about when recession hits and we start about building, it's what do our clients really want from us, and they want value. And what you were talking about there, about that, recruitment, that everyone's fighting against each other, everyone's trying to compete against each other, and you get that sort of very sort of strange. And I think I described it on Friday with the client as that bloodbath of recruitment, and you're all fighting for cutting fees, cutting margins against each other. We're better than this agency because of that, we're better than this agency because of that. When really, if you want to have a market where you have little or no competition, if you start to look at your behaviors and the values that you can offer to your client, and those behaviors and values create true value for your client, irrespective of rate, they will come and use you because they know they're going to get an absolute great service. So if you've got things on your website such as, integrity, we are ethical, etc., 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 then are the people that work for you truly aligned with those values? And do you truly believe those values? Because if you start to then deliver back to your clients in that way, then you've got to find people that deliver in that fashion. So if your big biller isn't delivering that value in that fashion, but that value also counts about what you deliver back across your business, and you're not delivering value across your team within your business, then all of a sudden your own values are unaligned. And when values are unaligned, what tends to happen is businesses don't function very well, because there's always that revolving door. And that revolving door costs businesses, as we know, a massive amount of cash every year to replace that person and retrain the person that have gone out through the door. So look at the values. If you're starting to look at cutting people, look at the values of the people that you have. And as Paul said, are they going to stand in the trenches and fight with you when it happens? Which means that you've got to put a value on your people, and that's about your head count, and look at about what head count generates per person in the business. Does that A, cover your break-even point, and B, is it enough to really sustain the business moving forward? So if you've got a business that's, say, doing £1 million, you've got 10 people in your business, then you work out the 10 divided by a million, okay, so it's £100,000 per person, okay, per annum. Divide that into a month, 12 months, you get your monthly figure per head, but that's across everybody in your business. And then start to look at your forecast, start to look at your pipeline. Have you got a forecast and a pipeline that will bring that proportion of money back to you? Because if you haven't, then you might have to downsize. If you've got a pipeline that looks like it's going to bring far much more than that, then you might have to increase your head count. So you can now start to measure that head count, whether you increase it or decrease it, by the proportion of money generated per head across the business, and look at that in that way.
Howard, I mean, I'll just add another point to this. I think let's talk about the people that are fantastic for your company, the people that have been incredibly loyal to you, that have done brilliant work for you pre-COVID, and have demonstrated during this lockdown their commitment and loyalty to you. You know, they've shown the right spirit, the right attitude, they've gone the extra mile. I think now's a great chance for you as owners to show your appreciation. You know, we want to lock down those people into our businesses for the next 5, 10, 20 years. Let's talk about things like EMI share option schemes. Let's look at profit shares for those people. let's make sure that the real talent in our companies are kept in our businesses. You know, to Howard's point, you don't want to have got to a point where you've spent time investing in people, developed them as brilliant consultants, only for you to see, as we come out of this, them leaving your company to go and work for a competitor or even opening their own businesses. It's like, you know, Richard Branson's comment about, you know, the idea is to train your people so well that they can go off and open their own businesses, but that you treat them so well that they don't wish to do so. And I think that's a very valid point. You know, we need to invest in our people, but the good guys, lock them down, give them every reason, every incentive to want to stay with you and help you to develop and grow your companies over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. So for me, I think there's two sides to the coin. One is making tough decisions about people who maybe aren't right for your company, and the other is about making decisions about the right people and how you reward them, look after them. And it's not just in financial terms, it's also to do with the way in which you treat them, the culture of your business, making your business like a family for those people. I mean, I've worked for businesses, and so have you, Howard, for many years. I worked for Office Angels for nearly 17 years. It's a long time. I worked for the old Alfred Marks Bureau for nearly 12 years. I was happy there. I was happy in those businesses. It was a family unit. They were family units. I was made to feel valued. I was valued. And I think that, you know, those years went very quickly, and I have no regrets about spending many years in one company. And that's up to us as leaders and managers. We have to create those cultures and provide people with every reason to develop their careers. That's also about providing very clear career paths for them so they don't feel the need to go and work for a competitor or open their own businesses. But it is also about the rewards for those people. And you've never had a better opportunity than recently to assess whether the people working in your business are people that you believe should be working with you for years to come, and whether they are people that perhaps you need to have some strong thoughts about over the next few weeks.
So that sort of leads us into the sort of the next part that we're starting to look at, which is, again, we've had lots of questions regarding, you know, do we get into a commercial battle with everybody and will fees drop, etc. You know, and we've got to start to think about what we do when we come out with our clients, etc. And I always think if you look at the perceived value that we give our clients, you know, and I always start to think now, when the pressure is on, where it becomes a client market rather than a candidate-led market, I always look at the value that I perceive that I give my client. And I always ask that question: if I was a client, would I pay for this fee, or would I take on this company exclusively? So I take my personal hat off and then look at my processes in a very, very stringent way. And I want to know whether they have actually give value to my clients and differentiate from my clients. So as we talk about counter-virus that's on the screen at the moment, what we're talking about now is counter, recession, counter lockdown. Because if we come out of counter lockdown with true value and provide our clients with true value, they will come and use you. So the question is, how do we test whether your client gets value from yourself? Now, usually when I go into agencies and talk to agencies about their value and how they've tested their value, what I normally get is, well, I've looked at our processes are absolutely brilliant. And my question is always, when you say you've looked at your processes, is that you and your team? Absolutely. And so that question about rose-tinted glasses then comes out. You've reviewed your processes and you deem them to be brilliant. Do you measure them against your competitors? Do you know what your competitors actually do? Have you actually gone out and spoke to your clients and genuinely find out what your clients truly want? Yes, we'll have an understanding to a certain degree, which is from our BD with them, but have we actually given them an opportunity to really tell us about our service, critique our service? A lot of agencies fear to do that because they fear the answers that they're going to get back from your clients. However, if we get a bad mark, brilliant. It means that's the bottom line. That's where we move up from. If we get a brilliant mark, great. That's the bottom line. That's where we need to move up from. So I think in this time, we've got to go out and acid test our clients, what they think of our service, but also what they want from a recruitment agency, because bearing in mind, as our needs have changed and our view of the market has changed in the last 3 months, so has theirs. So we need to make sure that we understand what clients truly want from us, because if we deliver the same services just with a bit more polish on that we gave before lockdown and try give them after lockdown, you might find that you're competing in a market where other agencies have moved away from you. So you really need to understand what value you give to your client and work with your clients in that way.
So when we talk about holding margins, that's relevant to the point you've made, Howard. I think, you need to understand what are you worth, and have a walk away price. I think we talked about this briefly a moment ago, getting into price wars is just really bad news. And you're going to see that, as we come out of this, there are going to be lots of your competitors who will feel the only way that they can maintain business is to drop prices. It's a terrible mistake, because clients, once they accept lower prices, are not going to allow you to increase your fees easily once the market changes. And it's a war you cannot win. No matter what price you go down to, someone will undercut you. Back in the day when I was business development director at Echo and Office Angels, we doesn't matter what price we went to, there were certain competitors who remain nameless that would undercut us. In fact, I sometimes took a view that I would put in a low bid for business without necessarily wanting the business, because I knew that my competitor would go in even cheaper than that. And I think that you have a walk away price, and that's about pride for me. I think there's a point at which you say, you know what, I'm worth more than this. Our business is worth more than this. And you have to have that line. There's a point, I think, emotionally, where I feel that, if we can't do business at a certain price level, then I'd sooner lock the door and walk away. Because I think it is about that. You are paid not just for the level of your service or for the quality of the candidates, but you're paid for your expertise, your knowledge, your wisdom in the market. And there's a price for that. You don't go into your dentist, do you, and argue about the cost of getting your teeth fixed, or you don't turn up with a lawyer and argue too deeply about things when they're helping you out over litigation or something else. I mean, the truth is, we are professionals. There is a price level. And yes, I know we all have to move a little bit on margin. We all have to give in a little bit here and there. That's part of being in business. But there is a point, in my opinion, where you say, no, I'm not going to do it for less than this level. And I think, to Howard's point, that comes down to your level of relationship with your clients. Do you have what we always term a trusted advisor status? Are you seen by your clients as invaluable, as having value to them, not just from the perspective of providing great staff or providing great contractors or temporaries, but more from the perspective of supporting them as individuals, as human beings, and providing massive value to the company as a whole? Have you got that level of influence with your clients? Because if you have, then they will not query your charge rates. They will not query too deeply your margins. And where you get pushback from clients, you have to look at what relationship you have with those clients. Are you one of many, many recruitment businesses they deal with? Do they view you the same as they view every other recruitment business? And if that's the case, what are you going to do about it? Because the only way you can move up that trusted advisor ladder is to get closer to your clients, is to meet them. If you can't physically see them at the moment, well, use these mediums, use things like Zoom, use things like Microsoft Teams. Find methods of getting close to your clients to understand their needs more intimately, because that is the only way ultimately that you can hold your margins and in fact increase your charges as time goes on. So this is a big issue. You're going to find yourselves surrounded by competitors who will see the only method of staying alive will be to cut their prices. It's a horrible situation. Do not go there. Instead, focus your energies on getting close to your clients, understanding more about their needs, and increasing the quality of your service to hold your margin and indeed increase it as time progresses.
So I think there's an interesting point there. We talk a lot, and in the next 2 weeks, we're going to run a session on marketing, purely on marketing.
Yeah.
We talk about brand value. And what you've got to think about, what Paul's saying there, and I have a slightly different terminology for that. I call it the KPI in your market. And everyone in this course probably thinking KPI and key performance indicator. No, I think KPI is about you, your sales staff, being the key person of influence in your market. So if you influence your marketplace and you are the key person in that marketplace and you're providing brand value, then you're in an opportunity to really take market share. If we talk about that feeding frenzy of recruitment, does your brand stand out from that feeding frenzy? Do you actually be able to elevate yourself above that feeding frenzy so you're in a completely different pool eating by yourself? It's a lot easier when you have very little competition, and value creates competition. So if your brand values looks the same as every other agency, then you're going to be in that feeding frenzy with that. But brand value isn't just about what your website says, what you post on LinkedIn. Brand value is all about what your consultants and how they interact with the marketplace on a daily, hourly, minute by minute basis. And so therefore, when you start to think about being the key person of influence, you've got to think about how they get to that key person of influence. So you've got to think about what you train them on and how you develop them. And a big part of training and development is all about the KPIs themselves, the key performance indicators. And again, I've had a conversation yesterday with a client that was very adamant that they wanted to push through a number of certain calls per day. And they wanted their clients, their consultants to make these calls. And my question was, why? Why that number? What logic is behind that number? And they couldn't give me a logical answer why they wanted to make X amount of new business sales a call. They couldn't work out whether that sales call was, well, we know if we make 25 sales calls a day, a week, a month, that would make the placements that we need. There was no logic behind that. And so once we started to understand that it has to be a logical thing, then all of a sudden, when consultants then have to hit those KPIs, they're not doing it out of necessity. They're doing it out of, they understand what they're going to get, and therefore they will provide value. So when they're calling a client and making that client call, it isn't just a rush call to get one of their KPIs ticked off. It is a genuine call. So it's the output from the input that we need to measure. And to me, what lots of people do, they make the KPIs about the input, when really the KPI should be what delivers the output. So if your KPI is, I want 2 new requirements a week, 10 CVs out a week, and 5 new interviews a week, then that's your KPI, not how many calls it makes to get there. Only if you're not achieving that do you then go and get to those figures and drive into those figures, because you want your consultants to give their best value to your clients and your candidates constantly, and that will start to create the brand value. It will create you being the key person of influence in the marketplace, and that's when you can start to hold your fees and hold your margins and not actually have to reduce them.
So, I mean, Howard, I think a really important point to make here, and we're sort of only a few minutes left, but we'll come back to this point, I think, in future webinars, is about investing in people, investing in your people. I have a client, I think Jim may be listening, Jim Roach, ARV Solutions, who a few years ago was voted the National Manager of the Year by Investors in People. It's something I know Jim's extremely proud of. I'm very proud of it as well. We got involved in Investors in People, worked very hard on the program, and became gold accredited in the first year of going for it, which is amazing. I've got another client that's platinum as well in Investors in People. I think this focus on developing your people through training, through a whole range of a raft of different methods is essential, not just in terms of their development, but in terms of the development of your organization. And you as leaders, as managers, you need to be investing in yourselves, looking at what training and coaching do you need, what mentoring do you require to help you. And this to me is a hugely critical, crucial position and point, because when things get tough, you really need to be upgrading, upskilling your people, and you need to be thinking along those lines too. As leaders, we have to be better prepared, more capable, show more ability, and to do that, we need to be coached ourselves. You need to have more information. You need to have more knowledge of the marketplace than the people that work for you. You have to give guidance. You have to share your vision. You have to give the answers. And that's very difficult because, as we often say, you don't know what you don't know. We're all at a certain point in our careers, we all have a level of knowledge and experience and expertise, but there's always someone out there that knows a bit more than you do. If that's reading books or listening to audio books or getting people like me and Howard involved, then brilliant. But you need to be looking around you and understanding, how can I improve my knowledge? And that, of course, transfers to your own people. How do you develop those people? How do you look at your future leaders in your business? I talked earlier about rewarding people well, taking care of them, and this is part of it. How do you keep training and developing those guys so that they feel that their skills are being enhanced, excuse me, and that they are more capable of dealing with current challenges than they were, as it were, 6 months, 12 months ago? You cannot allow them to come back into the workplace without really focusing on how you enhance their skill sets. It isn't good enough to think that it's just going to be the same as it was beforehand. It won't be, not for you and not for your people. So I think we can look at this in more depth, perhaps in 1 or 2 future webinars, but certainly looking at training and development, investing in people is a very vital part of your strategies as we go back into the workplace.
So I think we've sort of hit our hour. As always, we seem to run out. We haven't answered all the questions. We've got lots of questions that we want to cover regarding marketing. We've got lots of things that we want to cover about properly training and investing in your people. So over the next 2 weeks, we're going to cover those very heavily about training and investing in your people and marketing. I'd like to thank everybody again. We've had an enormous amount of people on this webinar from England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, etc. I'd also like to thank our Australian lady who's on here today as well, because it must be close to midnight where you are, and so I wish you a happy sleep. Everyone else, enjoy Tuesday. Let's get on with it. Let's really make it happen. And thank you very much for attending. It's much appreciated. Paul and I, you can't understand how much we appreciate you coming on and listening to what we have to say, and we hope you get as much from it. If you have any questions, as normal, please feel free to come back to us. And thank you very much, guys. That's been Love Work Life 60-minute mentoring session. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, everybody. Keep safe. Take care. Bye now.